So welcome to day 5 of Family Mediation Week. I'm Sarah Manning, Chair of Family Mediation Week and a partner at Hall Brown Family Law, where I work as a family solicitor and mediator based in Leeds. This session is being recorded and will be available on the FMC's YouTube channel. Please post any questions in the Q&A box that you have and we'll answer towards the end. Today's webinar is to discuss how mediation supports separated parents in building healthier co-parenting relationships. The aim of today is to discuss the benefit of early intervention and explore how mediation and therapeutic input can really assist separating parents and avoid ultimately costly, lengthy and acrimonious court battles. It's my pleasure to introduce you today to our speakers, Adele Ballantyne and Hannah Nichols. Adele founded Elder Consultancy in 2013, who specialises in relationships. Adele is a qualified psychotherapist and counsellor. She specialises in relationship breakdown for divorce and co-parenting, whilst also providing training and therapeutic support for family lawyers. Adele is also the chairperson of the Future Practice Committee and co-chairperson of the Parenting After Parting Committee with Resolution. We also have Hannah Nichols, a legal director from HCR based in Birmingham, specialising as a family solicitor and mediator in both children and financial matters. Hannah is passionate about finding new and innovative approaches to help her clients to achieve an amicable resolution with a focus on non-court dispute resolution. Hannah also sits on the Parenting After Parting Committee with Resolution alongside Adele. So thank you for coming today and taking part in Family Mediation Week. Adele, it'd be great to hear from you first about the work that you do with separated families.
So it's quite varied, the work that I do. I generally, although I see families as well, and particularly teenagers, I'm a big fan of working with teenagers. But generally, it's down to the parents really a lot of the time. And I found over the years that if you get parents cooperating and working together, then any issues around the children can fall into place quite easily. Children, look to their parents for guidance, for acceptance, for understanding what's okay and what's not okay. And so if we can really help the parents to shift their mindset so they're showing up as parents rather than individuals when they are co-parenting, then it's really, really helpful. So I work to support individual parents. Sometimes one half of the couple doesn't want to come to have some help for emotional support or that early intervention work, and we can't make them. There's a big thing at the moment, isn't there, about let them do it, and but we have to, because we can't control what somebody else does, says or thinks. We've just got to accept that they're going to do it their way and you're going to do it your way. So sometimes helping parents to let that go and supporting a parent, it can be really, really useful. So I'll work with them individually, I'll work with them as a couple, and I'll work with them as a family. And it's just about really providing some information, bit of education, because we don't get taught this stuff. We don't get taught about how to become a co-parent. So much time is spent on planning a wedding or getting together, and if you think about all of the information that's available about getting together, having that big wedding day, but there's very little at the other end. It is changing, it is getting better, but we need that education about what happens when the adult relationship no longer works, and early intervention is great for that. So I do a lot of work around early intervention.
Thank you. One of the things I always say is about you don't get an instruction manual when you have a child, do you? And
No.
Sometimes in mediations it comes up a lot about boundaries, what you think, what you think about screen time, what food, discipline, and often you don't realise until you've had the child that you don't agree on a lot of things, do you?
No.
Hannah, it'd be great to hear from you about what work you do with separated families.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm a family lawyer and mediator, specialising in both children and finances, but mainly on the children's side of things. So working with separated parents with regards to child arrangements, how children will spend their time following separation. I also sit on the Resolution Parenting After Parting Committee with Adele, and we're really passionate as a committee, and it drives my practice as a mediator in working together collaboratively with professionals such as Adele, relationship therapists. From the start, early intervention is key, helping parents at the beginning of their separating journey to really work through that journey and move on to the next chapter of their lives in the best way possible, especially for the children, building a healthy co-parenting relationship. And it's really good to know that we can play a key part in that, and to keep things as amicable as possible throughout mediation, throughout working with other professionals, and sort of see them move on into the happy next chapter. So Adele and I are going to look at how we can work with parents effectively, and how we can help as professionals working with separated families from the beginning. Because as you say, and quite rightly highlight, we haven't got an instruction manual on any of this. No one knows how to deal with it. So it's a little bit of trial and error. But if we as professionals working with families can just add to their toolkit a little bit, then hopefully it helps them move forward happily. So in order to build the healthy co-parenting relationship, we need to understand what the stages of the co-parenting relationship actually are. We use the word co-parenting as professionals quite a lot, but do we understand as professionals what those stages are? Because if we don't, how can we help parents that have separated? So it's a little bit about educating the parents as to what those stages will be, what's to come, what will that look like? And it may not be a linear path. It may not be that we've described to them that there are perhaps 5 or 6 stages of a co-parenting journey, and that they're going to seamlessly glide through each of those stages and think, right, I've felt those emotions in stage 1, we're moving on to the next stage. Because it may be that they both move forward to those stages at different times. And that's how we as professionals can have a really important input in helping them through. It may be that they progress through that co-parenting journey and the stages, and they regress. They go back into a previous stage because of their feelings and emotions. And that's how we as mediators and Adele, as a relationship therapist, can have that input to try and guide parents through as best we can. So we thought we'd just take a little look at the different stages in the co-parenting relationship. So I think Adele will talk us through the emotions perhaps experienced in stage 1, which is the initial separation.
It is a journey that nobody who gets married or commits to living together in whatever way that they do that, it's a journey that we don't expect. So it's a huge shock when it happens. And it's not just the practical aspects of our life together that are affected. It's everything. It's the hopes, the dreams, that we are taught, aren't we, through the poets and through novels and film, that people get together, it's wonderful, there may be ups and downs, but you're going to grow old together. There is that sort of narrative that we are subjected to, and of course, so when it happens, it is devastating. It's absolutely devastating, and so that's why we start to grieve. We grieve the loss of something that we had hoped and worked hard for. And I think when we talk about grief during that initial separation, and even maybe towards the last remaining year or so of your relationship together, it's very, very big, and it does affect us. It affects our thinking, it affects our logic. I can't keep count of the number of people who are rational and calm, and if that ever happened to me, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't be this, that and the other, and then it happens and they're the exact opposite of that. That's what grief does to us. It makes us turns us into these illogical beings, because we are driven by all of these chemicals in our bloodstream, and we grieve the loss of the relationship that has died. And it is a death, but of course we're still alive, so we have to sort of get round that, and particularly if we have children. I think sometimes it's easier if there aren't children. Not always, but sometimes, because you can go your separate ways. You never need to see that person again. But obviously when you have children, you're negotiating the death of your relationship whilst beginning a co-parenting relationship. And we don't really have the tools. And we talk, don't we, all the time about building resilience, and building resilience particularly in children. You can't have resilience without having a trauma first. It's the after effect. We build that resilience through the trauma that we experience. So the first time you've been in a relationship, you know, as a teen or whatever, and you're dumped, the first time it happens, it's devastating. You're never going to get over it. You know, you can't see the world going on, but it does go on. And what you learn is, perhaps the next time that happens, even though it feels dreadful, the resilience is that you know you will get through it. So it is a time of mixed emotions, big feelings that, as Hannah said, aren't linear. You know, we can experience those 5 stages of grief in 10 minutes, or we can wake up angry one morning but go to bed feeling, do you know, okay, I'm going to get through this. And it's understanding that process that is crucial for me as a therapist and for you as mediators, because once you appreciate that the people sitting in front of you emotionally might be all over the place. And before we started the webinar today, we were just chatting, and Hannah was talking about a client that she had that in the initial session was calm and logical and seemed okay. But the next session, which was a shuttle mediation, he was angry and blaming and talking about fighting. You know, so our clients, when they show up, you know, we don't know what's been going on for them. So if they show up differently from the first time you met them, then that's a conversation to find out what's been going on. You know, I can see you're really upset today. Talk me through what's happened in the last few days, because it may be they've had a letter from the lawyer that morning, or it could be that, you know, one of the kids has been ill and their, you know, organisation for the day has gone AWOL and they've had an argument about it. So find out. So these emotions, it's important that we know about that so that we can help our clients best possible.
And I think that initial separation phase is where parents might struggle the most with that communication and have difficulty setting boundaries, because of course they're so used to making decisions together predominantly, especially regarding the children, that now they're getting used to a new phase of their life where they've got to make decisions where the aim is kind of the same, but they're making those decisions apart, which can be very difficult because they're on a new journey as an individual and a parent, you know, individually, but also still having to work together with the other parent despite what may have happened in their relationship. So I think helping them as a mediator, as a therapist from the outset with that can really be an important part in them moving on to the next phase, which is sort of establishing that communication framework, because my aim, especially as a mediator, is to try and keep that communication going, even if it's really, really difficult and it feels really hard. It's just to try and keep it going and seeing how we can work to make it as positive as possible. And that's how we as mediators and other family law professionals working with separated families can help, because we can give them the tools to put some effective communication in place, make some small suggestions, and they can go away and reflect on that. And that can focus on, you know, the schedules for the children, what are the children's needs, working through a parenting plan, looking at all those little questions and all those little points that now need to be agreed because actually you're living apart. So we can have a really invaluable input from that early stage, moving on to the communication framework part, in setting them up for that next chapter, and then moving on to co-parent planning. So what is that? You know, beginning to make concrete plans regarding the child arrangements, putting together a parenting plan. How will it look in reality? Doing a bit of testing, trial and error. How are you going to put this into practice in reality? Because we all know that when we're putting things on paper, it can be quite idealistic. So actually go away and test it. And that's the beauty of mediation, because parents actually have the time to do that. We can explore a certain schedule or arrangement for the children in one session, and they can go away and have as long as they want to put that into practice, and then come back and evaluate that. How did it make them feel? How did the children feel? And that's where Adele can have a fantastic input in terms of looking at how they've looked at that and how we can work with them to maybe make adjustments.
I think it's important to remember as well that, you know, with your clients, they probably haven't been communicating well for quite some time. And in some relationships, if ever, you know, we have these conversations that can sometimes be almost parallel, where you both think you understand each other, but actually there's something is lost in translation. And so when they come to you, or indeed to me, you know, it is about understanding what they are good at. Have they, in their communication together, and have they reached any decisions before the relationship started to fall apart, and how did they do that? And having an understanding about how they communicate together is important, because if they haven't really been successful, particularly towards the end of the relationship, this is a really good opportunity to show them that they can do it, and maybe they're just doing it in a different way. And that is so empowering, because if for the past, you know, on average, it's about the last 18 months of a relationship where real disconnection can happen, and I am generalizing, so bear with me. But if all of a sudden, you know, they realize that they can make some decisions together, that is so, it is empowering. I don't think there's another word for it. And it gives them confidence, because obviously once the mediation process is over and they're continuing their co-parenting together, they will be making decisions. And what you're showing them is that they can do that. And even in the most sticky situations, they can find a way through it. And that is a really good thing. So it's worth remembering that their communication, what was it like before, and how you can offer them new suggestions, because we tend to be quite linear in our thinking. This is how we've communicated, so this is how we must communicate going forward. Actually, there are lots of different ways to do that. And for some, it's just been introduced to a co-parenting app, which it means that all of their private social media and messaging systems are no longer in use for that couple. You know, it provides a separation, and they have a place to go, which is just for their co-parenting discussions. That can be really helpful, particularly if you've got a client who, or one half of a couple who is desperate for some autonomy and independence because they felt smothered in a relationship. That can offer such freedom, even though it's not, it is, because they can detach from the personal and go to the co-parent. So it's that shift in the relationship and helping them to understand that, yes, they are separate now as adults, but they are together as parents. It's a big shift. It's a bit like when you do collaborative training for divorce, you know, that light bulb moment where you realize that you're not just you and your client, but you're you and your colleague and both clients. It's a big shift.
And I think once you've established that, it helps parents move into this sort of stabilization phase. So over time, they will have worked out what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and come to a kind of middle ground, hopefully. And then that will give them the ability to sort of have that long-term co-parenting relationship. And there's going to be challenges. They may face relocations, children grow up, remarriages, and they may have to revisit some of those previous stages because their emotions change and they find themselves in a different position again. So it may often be going backwards and forwards in those stages, but with the end goal of sort of really putting in place that long-term co-parenting relationship. And then what we want to try and do as mediators and other family law professionals is really to try and capture the parents as soon as possible if they are struggling, and help them with that. So as early as possible in that separation journey, rather than once they've perhaps gone a couple of years through the co-parenting journey, but feeling that actually communication hasn't got any better, or things have become more hostile. One parent may be threatening court, and they haven't really become equipped in dealing with the separation or how to move forward, because I think that's quite a natural feeling for parents in feeling stuck, and that they don't really know how to deal with husband's new partner or wife's new partner, or moving into a blended family situation, because we have all these scenarios presented to us, and we want to try and deal with them as best as possible. So in the mediation, as I said earlier, we've got time to explore that, but as early as possible, because then we can help move through the journey with the parents and really bring them into that healthy space. So Adele, from your perspective, I think early intervention is absolutely key, isn't it? And if you can come on board into mediation as soon as possible to really delve into the dynamic of the couple at the point of separation, that's really key, isn't it?
It is, and I remember many years ago when I was teaching the SPIP. I used to work for Relate, and we taught the SPIP, and so many of the parents who attended that, at the end of every session, there was at least a couple of parents who said, "I really wished I'd had this right at the beginning, because what I know now, I realise, what I've done." And I think the thing to remember is that because of the emotions that are involved, it can feel really, really, I've got to get all of these decisions made. I've got to get this all sorted out now. Actually, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I had some really good, not that I've ever run a marathon, furthest I've ever run is 10K, but I had some lovely advice from a friend who runs marathons all the time. And he always says, at the start of any race, start slow and then slow down. And I think that's quite a good idea for parents who are separating, because they are going to be co-parenting a long, long time. And so taking time at the beginning, slowing it down, allowing the grieving space, means that they can make space in their heads to receive that information that is so vital. Things like understanding what the children need from them, and what can happen when they get it right, versus what they can do or show in their behavior towards their children that might make it go the other direction. An eye roll, a sigh when another parent shows up is a message to that child. It gives information to that child, and particularly younger children. I'm sure that everybody listening will have had situations where children are saying, "I don't want to go to the other parent." Well, how do those parents enable that child to go? Are they putting Frozen on 10 minutes before the other parent's due to show up, knowing that it's going to be really hard to remove that child from a film that they love? So talking about how to enable relationships moving forward with parents is really key. And I suppose from my involvement in mediation sessions is, we do very different jobs. We work in very different ways, but there's synergy to the roles that we have. And so, I've always been blown away when working with mediators, because you do such an amazing job. And I sit there and think, oh, wow, I would never have thought of that. And equally, I've had mediators say to me, "Oh God, Adele, I would have never thought to ask that question. I would have never thought to go there in that thinking at this point." But it's so good. It works together really, really well. And I think when we're talking about the long-term effects on children, we have to start getting this right, because these parents are role models for their children. And there are children in this world who are co-parented really, really well, who have wonderful relationships with mum and dad's new partners, and they're allowed to. But parents have to learn that they need to do that. So that's what early intervention is all about. It's a legal journey, it's a mediation journey, and it's an emotional journey. And we need all of those people to support that couple and that family through the process. So for me, we need to be all there at the start helping. And people worry about cost, don't they? But actually, if we can do it in a year compared to doing it over 4, 5, 6, 10 years, one parent I had in a spit once, 10 years they've been going through court, cost, all of that. So I think if we can do that early intervention, help them to sort a parent plan, because they won't have thought about that. They'll only be thinking about now, what's happening now, how am I feeling now. But this is an endurance race. This is a lifetime of parenting and being parented. So let's try and give them that information from the beginning.
And I think as mediators, one of the positives is that we can really work with parents to be creative, which, for example, in the court process, isn't necessarily something that comes about because you're so focused on the next hearing. You're so, stressed about the next hearing. It's costing a lot of money. So perhaps it's not a natural thing to feel that you're thinking of other options that may take you out of that process. So from mediation session 1, having had the MIAM and discussed with the parents what's important to them, what's important to the children, we can then really dig deep into, okay, what would work for you as a family? We've got time. We haven't got any court procedure. We haven't got a court hearing in the diary. Would it benefit you to go away to a parenting workshop? Then come back, see how you feel. Any input from anyone else, a DAO, a divorce coach, is there something in the back of your mind in regards to finances that preventing you from having conversations regarding the children? We don't want to blur the two, but sometimes until one thing is sorted, it stops parents moving forward. So we've got the benefit of time and creativity in helping the parents to really plot a line and have a plan as to what will work best for them. And, keeping that communication open, trying to reduce conflict from the start will hopefully then enable them to reach an agreement far quicker than, as Adele said, waiting for perhaps in the worst case scenario years, which will inevitably not really help build that healthy co-parenting relationship and could perhaps destroy it, which will inevitably have an impact on the children and their ability to build relationships as they grow up. So we have an important role to play, and the earlier we do that and the sooner we address those needs from that first mediation session, the better. And I think you touch upon, Adele, working as multidisciplinary teams, having a therapist input or any other family law professional from the start, and costs. I think a lot of people can be afraid that costs are going to mount up. But if we look at the cost of mediation, and obviously it differs, and the cost of involving family law professionals, it can actually work out cheaper. So I think it's about doing the research, exploring that with the parents and seeing how that fits in compared to what perhaps court proceedings may be. Because I think once you look at that very realistically and sort of plot it out for them, they can see the benefit of having this multidisciplinary team in place from the get-go. And I think they like the support that is there for them. And they haven't got that worry once they leave the session because they know they're coming back with a full team around them. So I think that's something that can really be harnessed by us as mediators.
And it's not unusual to have a team around you.
No.
I've just had a new knee in November, right? And, but I couldn't have had that new knee unless I'd had an anaesthetist, a surgeon, nurses, the physiotherapist, the people who looked after me on the ward and fed me, so that was a whole team working for one purpose. And it seems to me incredible that there hasn't been a team around couples and families as they go through this harrowing process, and so embracing the value of other professionals within this space is key. It doesn't take away from anything that a lawyer does or a mediator does or a therapist does. What it does is complement. It makes it better. And I think if we can just shift our mindset, you know, the narrative around divorce it's been changing over the last few years. Even since I've been working in the space, it's come a long way in many respects. You know, there was no one couple, one lawyer when I first started working, and it's not that long ago. So feels like it, but it's not. And I think that you know, we need to move with the times. Blended families now outnumber traditional nuclear families. We need to shift how we work in order to accommodate the shift in family life.
And I think you make a good point in terms of working together and understanding how we work together and explaining that to our participants in mediation. And Adele and I had a chat last week in terms of, you know, we as mediators might not be able to work through the emotions because that's not necessarily how we're trained. That's not our skill set. So we look at things slightly differently. And emotions can be a little bit of a blocker for people to move forward in mediation. So if one person is absolutely adamant that they don't want to move in their position, reach a compromise, and they want to go to court if the other person doesn't agree, what's driving that? You know, Adele, you're equipped with those skills to really ascertain what is causing that emotion. And you referred to the example of the mediation I had the other day. And you would ask yourself, well, actually, why is this person angry today? What has happened? And you made a good point about, and this is something we could all think about as mediators, perhaps if there's been an argument, if there's been, you know, crosswords, if there's been a letter that has caused stress received on the day of your mediation session, perhaps it's better to reschedule. And you recommended that, Adele, and it's something actually that I'd not thought of. Actually, what's the point in coming to the mediation session if actually you don't feel that great today? So I think from mediation session 1, we could perhaps have that really open conversation with parents and say, do you know what? If you don't feel your best self, or you just don't feel like talking that day, maybe it's better you contact me and we rearrange, because then you can have a far more productive, constructive session when you're feeling okay to talk. Because actually, you know, in situations where we're seeing people in the same room and they've got to face their ex-partner, that's hard enough in itself without even having to speak. So if they're just not feeling good, the chances are is that session could become quite jarring, and actually we may not make much progress, which can often cause people to be frustrated if no progress is being made, or if one person is feeling particularly down that day or doesn't want to speak, then the other person is more likely to say, well, this is a waste of time, it's not working. So I think that transparency, that openness and that communication from the start in saying, you know, we really need to work together to see how this will work. If you're not feeling like it today, let's rearrange, because actually that's going to be better for you all. And that will have an impact on the children, because if they're going home feeling frustrated, sad, angry, and the children are there, they're going to pick up on it, or they're going to hear something, a conversation to a friend, a conversation to a family member, or just an angry shouting experience if they feel frustrated. So I think we need to make sure we educate parents as to the process of mediation, actually how it can work better for them and better for the children if we just communicate about how we feel and really structure the sessions in a way that will complement the journey that they're going on.
I think as well, it gives parents an element of a control in a way. You know, we during this time, it can feel for our clients that this is a stone rolling down a hill that's gathering momentum and they can't stop it. And, you know, there's so many decisions that need to be made and it can all feel a bit overwhelming. So sometimes having that, you know, opportunity to say, do you know, I'm not feeling it today. That's not as an excuse to just delay mediation or therapy or whatever. But, you know, sometimes when they show up and you just know they're not they're not in the right headspace. It is a conversation, and it's certainly one I have with my clients. If I'm picking up, oh, something's not right here, we'll have that conversation, and it can feel really good, you know. And they come back next time, they go, do you know, that was such a good decision. I really wasn't feeling it, but today I'm ready to do some work. And you know, that's really positive and empowering. So yeah, I think it needs to be collaborative. It needs to be um, for the clients to feel, because they're driven by fear a lot of the time, you know, because they don't know how this is going to end up. So what happens when we're fearful? We cling to something that we know. And even if we know deep down that's not what we want to do, or that's not how we want to go, we cling to it because we know it. And for now, that's keeping us safe. So discuss what the fear is, because if we can find out what that is, then we can progress.
I was just going to say, early on in my career, I realised that when you do a joint session, always check in with each of them separately, because I had very early on in my mediation career an explosive mediation where something had happened that evening, and text when previous sessions had been really amicable and got on well. So I always now, the fear of that, I always check in and make sure what's gone on and that you're aware of everything that's going on. So there's also that to feed in, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think within hybrid mediation, that's important too, because you've got colleagues, maybe they've had a rubbish day, you know, maybe something has happened in their life. It's always good, I think, to check in with everybody who you're working with and, you know, everything okay. I think that's just part of creating a better working space.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people, if you have cancellation policies on that morning, if I have any clients we do the assessment meeting or they're suffering with mental health or anything, I always say to them, I know we'd say you've got to cancel, give us as much notice, but if you're not there on the morning, please phone us, because, you know, we make an exception. We don't want anybody to be, you know, we don't want to have the really difficult mediation. You want it to work and not unpick all the good work you've done in previous sessions as well, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know, Sarah, you're obviously very experienced in hybrid mediation. Do you notice that shift in emotions when you've got people sitting with their lawyers as well?
Yeah, and I think people have a different mindset when with the solicitors, and sometimes it keeps the emotions under control and a bit more looking at the future. And I think also what happens in the hybrid mediations, you're going back and forth. So they have like 15 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes where they're speaking with their solicitors and they've talked things through. Whereas then when you come into the mediation, it's about looking at practical steps moving forwards. And I think sometimes having a therapist in that session, because you're really conscious that someone's gone away and talking about you in another room for 15 minutes. It's really not a nice feeling. And then you're coming back and you're anxious about what to do. So having that therapeutic support and the solicitor support to keep you on track, not letting emotions run away with you, does really help with a hybrid mediation. Because otherwise, if you're in a joint session, you haven't got that reflection time, you know, when people go into fight or flight mode. So I think that's the real benefit with the hybrid mediation, and also the benefit of holding confidences between the rooms. So when you do a hybrid mediation, you don't have to tell the other person what they've said and vice versa. And I feel like I'm used as a soundboard a lot in that situation, where I rephrase things that you know are going to be triggering to the person because you spent some time with them. So I think it's really beneficial to try keep co-parenting relationships on track. And there's some things that are just better off not said, aren't there?
Definitely, definitely. But it's interesting, isn't it, the dynamic and the stages of mediation, whether that's through hybrid mediation or through just joint mediation or shuttle. You're going to have to tackle those stages. You're going to face emotion. We as mediators can see in raw emotion from the participants by sitting in front of them. And Adele, you're experienced in dealing with that every day. And we need to work with that in the best way possible for building that healthy relationship. Adele, what can you tell us about your experience in terms of working with mediators and how we as mediators can perhaps make our sessions as productive as possible for the benefit of the parents?
I think we were talking, Hannah, weren't we, before, and I was telling Hannah about some clients I'd worked with, and I think what stood out for me, having worked with these clients, is that mediation is so important for separating couples, because sometimes, and I know, you know, only because mediators have told me this, but I'm sure anybody listening, you know, have you had those clients who've shown up and you're talking to them and you're thinking, why are you separating? You've still got so much that you could really work on here, and you're baffled that they are going ahead with this. And it reminded me of a couple I've been working with for quite a long time now, and I wasn't their first therapist. And they're a blended family and they have a business together, and something happened and it just divided them. And I'd been working with them on and off for a couple of years, and they kept coming and they'd go away and do some work, and I'd be sitting there thinking, oh, I just don't know what's going to happen with this relationship. Anyway, they got to the point and they said, okay, we've decided, we've put the application, we've done it online, you know, the application's gone in, what's the next step? And we talked about this quite a few times, and I said, well, look, go to mediation, you've got the business to sort out. They'd already started talking about children, and they sort of sorted that out quite well, but there were just a couple of things that they needed to talk about. So off they went to mediation, and I didn't see them for a little while. Back they came, and they were like unsure. I think working with the mediator, being able to make some really difficult decisions about the business, about finance, and a little bit about their children, had helped them to see that actually they were quite a good team and really good at making decisions together. And then all of a sudden they shifted and they're now back together. But they are growing a new relationship together, working in a different way, using the tools that the mediator had gone through with them and the strategies that I'd been helping them with. And they describe their relationship now as just something unique and new. And they're really coming at their relationship from a totally different space. And they've been together about 10 years. So this is transformational for them. I don't think they would have got to where they are today without the involvement of that mediator. So what am I trying to say? I think what I'm trying to say is, you know, when you've got a couple sitting before you, it's not always definite that they will split, you know, and the work that you do can really help them to understand what they have got and how they are together, just as much as how they can be separate and go on and co-parent. And, you know, certainly seeing that transition for the couple, for me as a therapist, I've been doing this job a long time, it's been lovely to see them come back having been on the brink. I mean, they were looking at houses, they got their house on the market, they had sorted the business out, it was just the next step, and they said, no, we realize what we've got. And they're not without difficulty, they've got a long way to go, but it has been transformational. And I think that is just to be celebrated. The work that you do as mediators is crucial, but you're not just helping people to go their separate ways. It could be that couple with some therapeutic input, you know, those couples you think, oh, why are you separating? You know, maybe they've not tried relationship work. You know, maybe they think they've gone too far, but it's worth suggesting. Do you know, have you ever thought about having a bit of help with your relationship? You know, to see if this could be different. It's just worth a conversation, I think, sometimes with those clients.
And it's one of the things I go through in my MyAm, that you ask, have you had any counselling or anything, and you can explore that, or you know, and explain that they could do that. And sometimes I have done a mediation before where it's then after I've said to them, I feel like you'd need relationship therapy more than the mediation, and you can go back to that and then come back to mediation.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask Adele is, we've not talked about like child inclusive mediation with children, which is something that I do. Obviously, I'm always really conscious that you speak to a child for 1 hour and you can't build up a rapport, and it's very limited to what you can achieve. Can you speak to the children as part of mediation and work with the family as well and feed that back into mediation?
It's sort of with the child's permission, obviously, you know, because I think it's difficult, isn't it? You know, because children are also emotional about what's happening to their family. This is an enforced change for them. They have no decision in it. Their parents are making this decision. Their life is going to change as a result of that. And of course, they will be grieving too. So I know it is a particular bugbear of mine that as a family therapist, I would not start talking to a child about what's going on at home until I'd seen that child a few times to build a bit of a relationship with that child. And I think for those who are in the court process, who perhaps will come for mediation, I think children become very wary of professionals saying, I'm going to listen to you and I'm really going to listen and hear what you say, and I'm going to, you know, help support your words, only to have that dashed. You know, I've seen that so many times, and every time that happens to a child, they become more cautious, more wary, and they give up after a while, after the ninth Kafkas worker or whatever. You know, they just go, well, they don't listen. They say they're going to listen, and then they do the exact opposite. And you know, I don't think we give children enough credit. There are clever parents out there who will, through their behavior, influence a child, absolutely. But sometimes those parents don't realize what they're doing, and if they haven't had any early intervention, there's no way that they'll know, you know, because how do you know? So I think we have to be careful. I think the understanding that I have of child inclusive mediation, and particularly for an older child, I think it can be really, really fantastic, because for once they can let off that steam to someone who isn't their mum and dad, and also can sort of separate out what they want you to tell them and what they don't, because that is
Yeah.
a worry for children. I think as long as it's handled well enough and the child feels comfortable. But how do you know unless you've had a couple of sessions with that child? I just think it's more helpful. And I know the job is different, the job I do, but as a family therapist, I wouldn't do it as a one-off unless it was a much older child.
And that's why
Just because
sometimes when I'm assessing it, I'll think whether a therapist would be better to then feedback, rather to have more sessions than just speak. Because I've had some really successful ones where one sticks in my mind, where I spoke to a 14 and 15-year-old, and the mum and dad were just using anything to get at each other as to why they don't want to stay. And when I spoke to him, the daughter was just like, well, my straighteners and my makeup are at mum's. I don't want to carry books around through the week when actually all I'm doing is homework and then coming back. So it was nothing to do with mum and dad, that liking mum or dad more. And actually they'd just blown it out of proportion. And because she wasn't spending time with the younger sibling. And then the younger sibling said, oh, I love it spending time without my sister. We get to watch what I want on telly. We go through food that I want. So it just goes to show, for some cases that are like that, when there's no more safeguarding issues and more going on, that actually just finding out. And they were the most sensible people that I spoke to that day of what can move forwards. So just got quite a few questions that have come through, and I just have some of my own while I've got you both on. So, you know, often we suggest therapeutic support, or I do in my work as a solicitor and mediator, and sometimes you hit with quite a bit of resistance because of the costs, and Hannah, you touched upon that. Have you any tips on how we could promote more the therapeutic side to our clients, and how that would help in terms of mediation and legal, Adele?
I think that people hear the word therapist and panic. Some people think, well, I'm not crazy, so why would I see somebody like that? Some people say, well, we're not wanting to get back together, so why would I see a therapist? I think how you present it is important. So I often talk about this is a very difficult and emotional time, and a lawyer will do one bit of that journey, a mediator will do another, but we don't do the emotional bit, which is actually a big part of this. Having somebody to help you with some strategies, with some coping mechanisms, with some information, some help about what is a co-parent. We talk about co-parents all the time. What is it? we don't automatically know what co-parenting is just because we're separated and now that's what we do, you know. So I think it's about presenting it in a way without using that word because
Yes.
you know, I think that word is a turn off to a lot of people, not so much the younger people. I found that younger people, it can be quite trendy to have a therapist to go to, but for older people and you know, I think it's quite a big cohort of middle-aged people, isn't it? The silver splitters that with older children. So I think mention therapist and of course they always think that it's about getting them back together. It isn't. The work of a good therapist, couples therapist, relationship therapist, is you look at everything. What happens if you stay together and change nothing? What would need to change to make it a better relationship so that you could work together? And what might it look like if you go your separate ways? You know, it's looking at each scenario and finding out why you are where you are, what would need to change, whatever that is, and how do you do that in a way that is the best way possible. So I think it's about talking about what the support is rather than the title of the person who's delivering that.
And the value, I think if you know, in the mediations whereby you could add value, you could come into the session and just have a 5-minute chat, because to explain and educate as to what you actually do, like you say, because more often than not, that can be misconstrued and misinterpreted. And I think it can by some professionals as well. You know, there's a lot of people out there. We've got divorce coaches, we've got co-parenting coaches, we've got relationship therapists. How can we interweave these professionals into our mediations in the best way possible? So I think actually coming having a face-to-face chat for 5-10 minutes could really help in that sort of first or second session whenever we've evaluated that it could actually be quite beneficial.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a case I've been dealing with, a mediation case, where I got a referral for a children matter for the Maya. Met with husband, he really wants to deal with it, and wife in our mum in her Maya just cried all the way through, was so upset. And every time I tried to talk about practical steps moving forwards to establish if there is any element of negotiation and compromise from the status quo, she'd always start talking about her trauma from when they're separated and about her. So I've said that mediation's not suitable because, for one, we couldn't get anywhere through the tears, and she was obviously still traumatized. And I've spoke to her about therapy and other help. Just thinking in that sense, where husband or dad's been really disappointed that he can't do the mediation, and he even paid for the MyAM for both of them, and because it is confidential, you can't tell them, which is so frustrating. But in that sense, obviously, we couldn't do the therapeutic work with you, Adele, in joint session because I've deemed it as unsuitable. But I suppose we could then suggest and work with someone like yourself where you can go into it a bit deeper than we would at mediation. And even when I said to them both, it's not suitable, I've said to them, it's not suitable now, but it's not to say in 6 months' time it couldn't, and my door's always open. Is that some sort of case that it'd be really good, Adele, for you to sort of find out and help heal past traumas as well, to then get onto the...
People get stuck, you know, that 5 stages of grieving. People get stuck in anger and the depression, the sadness. They're the 2 most common places where people get stuck. And that stuckness can last a lifetime. You know, I once worked with a couple and I was approached by their 4 grown-up children, 2 boys, 2 girls, all married now, all with kids of their own. And they approached me because mum was still stuck and when I'd spoken to mum, she was, even though this was like 20 years ago, she was still in the kitchen the night her husband came and told her it was over. It was so real for her, and that is true trauma. True trauma. You are there again in that moment, and that's where she was, and it was affecting. So none of the weddings had gone well because mum and dad ended up having a big row. None of the christenings had gone well. They got to the point now where they were inviting them separately for Christmas or parties, or not even telling them when they were seeing the dad because mum's reaction was so horrendous. This can last a lifetime. And so if you have a mediation where you think, well, there's no way because one person is really struggling and really stuck, having some work, you know, just some conversation, some healing, some time to process can be so
Yeah.
helpful, because it could get them to the place where they could come back and have a
Yeah.
successful mediation.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why, you know, that support can't keep happening while that person comes back and has that mediation. You know,
Yeah.
that support for that person can still go on therapeutically whilst they engage in the mediation.
Thank you. We've just got 5 minutes left now, so if we can try quickly get through, we've got quite a few questions. So what are some examples of the tools that you suggest for putting effective communication in place? I don't know who wants to answer that, Hannah or Adele.
I think it's about finding out how they feel comfortable in communicating with each other, first of all, as individuals. What is their preference, so that you can try and think about how communicating with each other is going to work best. So
Yeah,
do they need to, it sounds silly, but perhaps do they need to have an agenda when they speak? Not a formal agenda, but just having written their thoughts down, so that when they speak, they have effective communication if they're having meetings or if they're going to discuss a certain issue. I think, Adele, you're going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you know, the key communication tools that couples don't engage in when they are separating is they don't listen to each other. They don't listen. So actually helping them to listen to each other properly. So listening is not just done with your ears, it's done with your eyes, it's done with not interrupting, it's done with not allowing your brain to start formulating your reply before they finish speaking. You know, it's those simple tools that we all need, you know, during times of communication, because it is not unusual for couples to have their set pattern of communication, and they you know, we all do it. We are in like feedback loops. So you say this, I say this, you say that, I say that, and couples become well practiced at that, and so they know how this is going to go. They know where this is going because they've had this conversation many times, and they're not necessarily talking about what they need to talk about. They're talking about the hurtful stuff, but they don't talk about the hurtful stuff. So it's about really listening to each other and validating.
Yeah,
You
one of the
know,
other questions
I
that,
hear you.
sorry, we've got loads of questions.
Sorry.
One of the other questions that have come through is about what agreements topics will be in a parenting plan. I'm just going to share on the chat the link to NACC's parenting plan with our family wizard,
Brilliant.
which
Yeah.
has got a really good template,
Yeah.
and you
And
can
it's
have a look
free.
on that. Yeah, and it's free, and that's one that I tend to say in my mediations now. Why don't you start to fill that out if we're doing other stuff, and then if you get unstuck, if they get on quite well, I'll go on to the next question. I'll try pop it in the
I
chat.
would also say, with one of the tools that I use with parents, only because it's amazing and it does help to spark off other conversations, is this is in the Parenting Through Separation Guide, bang in the middle, is the Family Justice Young People's Board 25 top tips. These are the things that children will want to say to their separated parents. I often give parents this and say, before our next session, just go through and read those and highlight the ones that you think you might have trouble with, because it can provoke such good conversation. Always, without fail, it's new partners. There's always that ticked off. But it's very interesting because these are the issues that parents will meet. So it's a really good help alongside the parent plan to you know, to help them think about where they're going to struggle.
Yeah, one of the other things that someone's asked, which I could answer quickly and just go on to the next one, about what parenting apps you would recommend. I use the Our Family Wizard. Yeah, they have a professional account. We can log in. You can really have a look at yourself before meeting with them and see what communication style they've got. Another quick question, which I think I'll have to be the last once we've finished, is can Adele support both participants within parallel with mediation, or only one participant?
I can do both as long as I've seen them both right from the beginning, and as long as it's equal. So In a therapeutic setting, if they were just coming to me as a couple for therapy, I see them individually and then together. Now, what I couldn't do there is then just see one person, but as long as it's equal and it's fair, and I've done shuttle mediation like that with a mediator, where we've both gone into each room and shared. And I just think, you know, we have to be careful, ethical and boundaried, and we, you know, that as therapists, we are neutral, like you are neutral. It's not our job to side with anybody. And it's important to remember that validating somebody's experience doesn't mean that you're siding with them. What it means is that you're seeing their experience and saying, you know, yes, I can see you've been through that. So as long as it's boundaried and ethical and they're each seen within the session, then yes, because we have to help these couples, you know, get through this.
Thank you, Adele and Hannah. We've got so many questions that have come through. There will be a follow-up email that gets sent from the FMC and asking any questions. So if you want to send them through, they will come to me and I can pass them on to Adele and Hannah, and we can try look at some of the questions that have come through and do a bit of a blog or anything like that, or reach out to us separately. Someone's asked for contact details. We can send them as well on the email afterwards and follow up. So thank you, thanks a lot for all coming. And also, this session will be recorded on the Family Mediation Council's YouTube channel as well. Please head to the Family Mediation Council. They've got a tab with all the list, and we are going to be doing resources. So some of the questions about what resources we recommend, there'll be a full list of there on there as well too. All right, thank you for coming. All right, and thanks Adele and Hannah.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye-bye.